Hello and welcome to the Elevate Your Soul podcast. Today I am interviewing Stephanie Webb. She is a community educator and coach who works to help people open their relationships, navigate polyamory, and increase the quality of connection in all of their relationships. She is an active researcher and writer. She has her own book. You can find her on her website or on Instagram. I've linked those up in the show notes at Unscripted Relationships or unscriptedrelationships.com. Her and I go into so many different topics today, but mainly this podcast was to help people who are in a monogamous relationship or who are really just in love with the person they are dating or potentially married to, and they have a strong desire to open up their relationship and try being in an open relationship or a polyamorous relationship or swinging or something of the like with the partner they are currently dating, and how to open up that relationship and how to have that discussion and conversation with your other partner without ruining the relationship you already have. Because once you've said to your other partner that you're interested in opening up the relationship, you cannot take that back, and then that person knows that that's something you are interested in. And I find this topic very interesting and very tricky on how to go about this, because since I've become polyamorous, I've had many chats with many people, mainly women more so, who are wanting to try polyamory or wanting to try being in an open relationship and seeing if it's for them or not. But then where it gets tricky is if they're already in a relationship with someone that they truly love and adore and do not want their relationship with that person to end, but they're still wanting to be, ethical and have morals around this and be able to explore an open relationship without lying or cheating to their partner that they already have and not ruining their relationship. So Stephanie and I dive into this on this episode for you. We also touch on some other interesting topics and have a lot of other insights on marriage, red flags when dating a fuckboy or fuckgirl, misconceptions around poly or open relationships, most common challenges in relationships and how to deal with them, i.e. jealousy. I've been wanting to do this episode for so long now with Stephanie, and I'm so glad it's finally happened. I totally enjoyed having this conversation with Stephanie, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode as much as I did. Hello, Stephanie. Welcome to the Elevate Your Soul podcast.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me.
I have been looking forward to interviewing you for a long time now, so I'm so excited you're finally here with me.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Thanks for having me again.
Thank you. First question of the day is, what elevates your soul?
Connecting with people. For me, the process of connection and relationships has always taught me about myself and taught me about more than myself. So that's what I would have to say elevates my soul.
Yeah, connection. I love that. I love that. All right. First question on polyamory for the day. Ba-dum-ba-dum. Is polyamory and ethical non-monogamy a new style of relationships? And if not, why have so many people in our society not heard of it or know what polyamory actually is?
Yeah, well, I think it's important that we define some terms here. I know that you've said you've talked about it before, but I talk about it always a little bit differently.
Yeah.
For me, polyamory is one type of open relationship. So I like to think of open relationships as an umbrella term, and poly is one style underneath that.
Yeah.
And so I define it as multiple simultaneous relationships that are typically sexual and emotional with the knowledge and consent of everyone involved.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes down to it, it's not super new to have open relationships. The word polyamory was coined by, well, arguably, this is sort of polyamory folklore now by Morning Glory Zell in the early 70s. But that timetable actually changes. It depends on the source you're looking at. And so the word, some people say that it actually was coined in the 90s. It just sort of depends, like I said. Yeah. And so it as an idea, or the word polyamory, I suppose, is relatively new, if you will, but the idea of it, having open relationships, is by no means new. Right. I do think that there is a cultural shift towards the idea of openness, which has created more of a conversation surrounding different types of relationships. And so as a result, there's a lot of people who don't know about it, but it is growing ongoingly. I found out the term, 12 years ago now, was when I first picked up the book Ethical Slut, and I started learning about it from the actual polyamorous lens. And that's when I learned about it initially. And I live in the Denver metro area in the United States, in Colorado, very central United States, which it hasn't always historically been super liberal, but I would say that in the last 5 years, we've started to have a lot more of a shift towards it, a lot more education, a lot more people who are willing to know about it. And I think that's one of the biggest cultural shifts, is that historically we haven't had the kind of, I don't know if capacity is the right word, but it seems accurate right now. There hasn't been an openness to open relationships in a large scale kind of way. And I do think that that's shifting now. There's a couple of books that have come out recently that are kind of fun, that talk about this if you are into the evolutionary biology of it all. Sex at Dawn is one of the best known ones. Lesser known is the woman who got mad and talked back at it, and she wrote Sex at Dusk. And so Sex at Dawn is about sort of the history of humans, and it sort of demonstrates that we are not monogamous. Sex at Dawn is the opposite of that. So she's arguing that we actually have been monogamous, both from a very, like I said, evolutionary biology perspective.
Right. That's really interesting, because I heard of one of the books you mentioned, how it said, like, back in the past, humans, I didn't know the book was actually about saying that we're not monogamous, but, back in the day, how we used to live in these tribes, and, we all looked after everyone's kids and things like that. And it was kind of more like an tribal, open community / relationships type of vibe. And it's interesting to hear that there's another one written saying that biologically we are monogamous. I find that fascinating.
Yeah. Really? So Sex at Dawn is the one it's literally constructing an argument for why humans were not or are not, like, they're answering the question, are humans naturally monogamous? And their answer is no. And so they're fully constructing the argument based on our physicality, based on our sociology, based on our psychology, why we're not in that book. And like I said, Sex at Dawn, Sex at Dusk is the other one. My goodness, someday I'll remember it.
Can I ask, what was your journey like, in terms, you said you found polyamory 12 years ago, and like, how has your relationships unfolded? Like, are you monogamous yourself, or do you count yourself as polyamorous, or how has that journey been for you?
Yeah. So I wanted to be in an open relationship for a long time. And then I found my first, my high school sweetheart, my first love. He and I were monogamous because I didn't really know any other way. But then 4 years into that relationship, I decided that I wanted something different. And I really wanted him to be.
Why, can I ask why you wanted to be in an open relationship?
It's just what I always thought about. Okay. I don't really have a good answer for that.
So you knew it was an ethical thing when you were younger?
I didn't know it. It just monogamy didn't really make sense to me. Like, I have very young memories of being in like second grade wanting one of my friends to share a boyfriend with me. I remember in the one that I talk about the most was in high school when I read The Great Gatsby, and just being super upset that Daisy could not have the frivolity that her husband Tom Buchanan did. And I wrote a whole angry paper about the double standard of monogamy. And then I found myself in a monogamous relationship. And so it just was what it was. Like, it wasn't something that I had anticipated. But then he and I were together long enough, and we started to become adults, essentially, that I realized that I wanted to be with him, but I also wanted to experience interacting with other people. And so when it came down to it, I we wound up breaking up. He did not want an open relationship.
Yeah.
And so I decided to pursue that. And I didn't know what it was called. And I didn't know that there were other people who ethically wanted it, if you will.
Right. Exactly.
But I decided to go for it. And I started dating Ryan, who is my partner now, who, if you follow me on Instagram, you hear me talk about pretty regularly.
Yeah.
And Ryan and I did not like begin our relationship with the anticipation of being together for, it'll be 11 years now here next week. But I essentially sat him down when we first started seeing each other, and I told him that I wanted to be in an open relationship. And we didn't really know what that meant, and we didn't really have the words for it, but we went after it. And then very shortly after that, I found the book, The Ethical Slut, which really was my early framing. There was not a whole lot of other resources back then.
Yeah.
I found The Ethical Slut, and I found a podcast that I love that's called Weekly that's still running. It's a free weekly podcast. I think she's been going for over 10 years now, because it's been since I started this. And she's just a wonderful resource. Her name is Minx, and her co-host right now is Lusty Guy. And they were very formative in my early years. And I realized very quickly, though, that there were not any resources, and that there was no one else doing this, and that we were making it up as we went along. And we fucked a lot of shit up, and we hurt each other a lot. And I've ebbed and flowed in my identification, always under the open relationship realm. I played with swinging, which wasn't really for me, so I wound up researching it. I really dug into the Denver metro swinging community and became friends with a lot of people and had a lot of opportunities, and realized it was just not my shtick, if you will. And then I very much identified as poly. That seemed like the word that was the most applicable to me. I gravitated into relational or relationship anarchy for a little while, but that didn't seem like it stuck. And it's just sort of, for me, a use of a term is more important to help identify like-minded people than it is to really like dig my heels into the sand and call myself something. So solo poly is probably what I would still stick with now. For me, solo poly is the intention of developing my relationship with myself first in order to come to a relationship as a whole person. I prefer to live alone. I prefer to have all of that kind of stuff too. Unfortunately, preferences and reality don't always collide. So Ryan and I do live together right now. We own a business together here in Denver. It's a gym. And so he and I live together, and my other partner lives about 45 minutes away in Boulder. His name is Jeremy. Jeremy and I have been together for a little over 3 years now. And there's been a couple other important humans in my life, but Phil and I were together before that for about 6 years. Before Jeremy and I met, there was a little bit of an overlap there. So right now I still very much, I generally call myself as in an open relationship, because that's what it is. But the ebb and flow of my experiences have been so varied that it just helps to maintain that sort of open title, because it helps me speak to all of the experiences that I've had.
Beautiful. So you have 3 partners at the moment?
I only have 2. I only have Jeremy and Ryan. Phil and I broke up about 2.5 years ago.
Okay. Interesting. That's cool that you tested, all the different types of, a few different types of non-monogamy. That was really cool too.
Depends on the people who are involved. It depends on the emotional energy that's involved. It depends on time of year. Like there's just so much involved. It depends on really the day of the week for me sometimes, and where I'm at in my period cycle too, so
Nice. Very fluid. Okay, so this is quite a big question. I don't know how long it's going to take to answer this, but what advice would you give for people who are madly in love with someone, or they've been married for a while, or they've just been in a really, steady, beautiful, close, long-term relationship with someone, and they really, really want to keep dating this person, but they have a desire to explore ethical non-monogamy, whether that's polyamory, or whether they want to try being open or swingers or anything of the like. How do they have that conversation with their other partner without ruining the relationship? Because once it's said, and once that conversation is opened, like, hey, I'm kind of interested in maybe, opening this relationship or seeing other people, you can't take that back. And then your partner will always know that that's a desire you have. So, like, without ruining something that you already have with someone, for couples who are listening to this who are wanting to explore in non-monogamy, what advice would you give to those people?
I think there's a couple of ways of approaching it. One would be more hedging, right? Asking if someone would ever have an interest in a threesome, or um, if you there's a couple of movies that I can't think of the name of, but like watching a movie and bringing up it as a hypothetical conversation. There's ways in which to hedge that conversation where you can sort of glean an interest in your partners. And that's normally when I talk to folks about doing this. So my research, I think I need to take a step back. I have my PhD in communication. And so my research is based on polyamorous identity and how do people become polyamorous, or like how do they make that shift communicatively. And one underrated way of doing this is literally like hedging a conversation. How would you feel about having a threesome? Oh, that movie was interesting, there's some polyamorous folks in it, would that be something you'd ever want to watch? What do you think of Sister Wives? Like, all of that is highly useful, and it's a really it's a helpful tool just to glean interest. I think so that's one way if you're really concerned. The second way would be stepping into it in a more formal and direct way. And knowing that just because you're voicing it doesn't necessarily mean that your partner's going to hold it against you forever, or that it's going to be the end of your relationship. To say like, hey, like, that's something that I would be interested in. I'm not going to pursue it unless you're game for it, because I understand the agreements in our relationship. And that's usually where the fork in the road happens. If it is something that you feel really passionate about and you do want to pursue, you'll know if you need to step out of the relationship that you're in because your partner doesn't want to. And I'm not saying that like it's easy. Knowing that you want something that is fundamentally different than the relationship that you're existing in is one of the hardest things to do. And I've done it before. That's how I came into openness, was really fighting for a relationship that I wanted to maintain, but he couldn't do it and he didn't want to do it. And so we wound up breaking up, and it was awful. It was heartbreaking. It was gut wrenching. I questioned my decision and all of that kind of stuff. And like, that's going to be a part of it, right? That's a part of the human experience. But if you are looking at this as like, I need to try this or else I cannot keep moving forward in this relationship, that's another way of looking at it, right? So we're making the presupposition that like, you kind of want to try it, but you're happy with your relationship. And if you hedge it and your partner says no, like, cool, you can stay monogamous. If it's the other side, if it's the side where you're like, no, I need to do this, like, this is who I am, you cannot expect your partner to, one, agree, two, decide to do it, and three, like, just all of a sudden identify the same way that you do. And so like, if you do hedge it, it is a risk, and understanding that you can take a calculated risk. And if you are in a happy relationship, usually if you take that risk but you mean that you would stay monogamous if your partner didn't want it, like, cool, take that risk and know that the security of the relationship is there and move with it. If there's other things that are going down and you really need to make that change and your partner isn't there, like, what are you willing to do? And that's one of the harder questions that people wind up facing is monogamy what I need to do for the rest of my life? And is this person the person that I want to be monogamous with or not, you know?
Yes. And also, just purely, they might just have a strong desire to be polyamorous or to try an open relationship. And after a year or two or that they might be like, okay, no, monogamy suits me better. And then it's like, damn, I lost the love of my life, who I've been married to for 20 years because I had this fucking desire, and now I've done it and it was fun, but now I've lost my wife. So
we all have to deal with repercussions of our actions. So it depends on what you want.
And I guess the strength of the wanting and love of the other person you're with as well, to allow you to explore that desire or see if that's something that's for you or not. Because as well as it might not be for the other person, like one person might have a desire to try being in an open relationship, but the other person might not, but they might still want to be with you and allow you to have that freedom while they're still monogamous with you.
Well, I get a lot of questions on Instagram that are like, how do I make my partner be polyamorous?
Yeah.
And my response is, you don't, and they don't ever like that answer. But it's really fundamentally like, you cannot make someone do this. You can't make them want it,
Yeah.
unless you want to step into the unethical realm of it, in which case, like, know that that's a thing. But like, that's pretty much like, cheating is a thing because people want to maintain the guise of monogamy but still be able to engage in non-monogamous behavior. It's
Yeah.
always been grandly ironic to me that people who cheat still call themselves monogamous. And
Yes.
so when it comes down to it, it's like, you're not, number one, like, let's have a reality check. But number two, the idea that we can manipulate our partners into doing the thing that we want to do is just wildly problematic. And it speaks towards understandings of monogamy and being able to shift your partner's perspective and a reliance on commitment in marriage. And I've had people go as far as saying, like, my partner is, or my wife is my wife, or my husband is my husband, and they will still be with me even if I pursue this. And it's like, let's talk about that. Like,
Right.
let's complicate that a little bit.
Yeah.
And let's look at your motives, and let's look at how you're perceiving this person, and let's figure out if this is something you want to do for you, and what does that mean, and how do you initiate that in a way that does feel ethical, and how do you go about doing it in a way that, like, might not destroy your relationship but keep
Exactly.
agency for both people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. I would like to go from there. How do you know when open or polyamorous or whatever, when these relationships are in alignment for you, which I think for a lot of people, they might need to explore and actually do it before they know if it's really something that's for them or not? Or how do you know if someone's just using it, an open relationship, as a way to hide or escape being vulnerable? So for example, in my life, I've known some men, kind of like middle-aged men, maybe like in the 30s or whatever, and they say that they're not interested in monogamy. Um, and they're using like open relationships and just seeing a bunch of women, because they're afraid of that commitment, and like really opening themselves up and being really vulnerable to one person because they're afraid.
I mean, I suppose that depends on the relationship that you have with the human and whether or not you can trust them, right? Like,
Yeah.
if they're telling you this is what I'm doing and this is why, all you can do is believe them.
Yes.
I very much stand on the platform of, like, listen to what people are telling you and believe that that's part of who they are. If when you start seeing different behavior and you start believing differently, that's when you can decide whether or not you want to keep engaging in that relationship. Um, but for some people, most of the time, when you approach open relationships and you approach ethical non-monogamy or polyamory, whatever word you want to apply to it, like, you fundamentally are interacting with someone in a very deep, very committed way, but you're just doing it with more than one person. So it's like, this is a terrible analogy, and I'm sure that if there's poly folks that are listening to this, they're going to want to flick me in the eye, but it's like if you had multiple monogamous relationships simultaneously. And that framing is really important because we conflate the word monogamy with things like commitment, with things like marriage, and with things like true love. And so sometimes you have to say that word in order to click people's understanding into the depth of the relationships that there are going on there. And so it's not like being polyamorous means that you have a bunch of casual relationships.
Yeah.
It could, by no means does that discount it. There's not a right way to do it. But for most folks, they're using that word as a way of saying, no, I want committed, romantically engaged, multiple relationships simultaneously. When
Yeah.
you start using other words like swinging or relationship anarchy in some ways, or like, I am just dating around, that
Yeah.
would be a different way of framing it. So I guess to answer the question where you said, how would you know if you're using this for good reasons or to hide from commitment?
Yeah.
It's going to depend on every person.
Yeah.
I think it also depends on, again, each person is so different from month to month, from year to year. We all grow and change. And so some years, maybe you even want more commitment or less commitment. And it just kind of depends on the experiences that you're bringing to the table and who you're interacting with at that point and who is in your relationship wheelhouse. But you can't guarantee, you can't know what other people are doing. You can get a gut feeling, you can ask them questions, you can see if how they're acting in the world feels respectful and good to you and decide to interact with that or not, or you can step away from it.
The question is less so how do you judge what's best for someone else. It's more if someone's listening to this themselves and they're questioning what's best for themselves.
Yeah. Okay. So if they're like, if you're trying to decide if you want to be non-monogamous or not, or if you want to give it a whirl, is that what you mean?
Like for someone who's listening to this and they're not wanting to get in monogamy because they think that open relationships it better suits them, but perhaps open relationships might just be suiting them and make them feel more comfortable because they are afraid of commitment. When they say monogamy, they'll think, oh no, this woman wants me, this woman wants to see all my true colors. She might move in with me. I might need to feel vulnerable and tell her how I feel. And then I'll be afraid she'll cheat on me. But it's, if you keep these people from a distance, and that would be, I guess, for me, that would be more like an open relationship than a polyamorous relationship. Like if you're, or just seeing a bunch of people. Do you get where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. I think that lots of people use, let's put it this way. In any relationship type, there's shitty people and there's good people, right? Like it doesn't really matter which relationship type you're looking at. And so when it comes down to it, if it's trying to figure out like the connection component, I think it's just a fundamental misinterpretation of what polyamory is if you think that you're not going to be getting into committed vulnerable relationships.
Right.
And there's just like a misunderstanding of it and a misuse of it. And pardon me if I'm not supposed to have profanity, but there are some people who like step into it with like a fuckboy perspective or a fuckgirl perspective. And they just want to like mess around a lot and
that's what I'm
call it and call it non-monogamy and call it polyamory. And like honestly, mostly it takes like someone to check them and to be like, yo, that's not what this is. And if they are running with people who have identified or who have interacted in other polyamorous relationships, like typically they get called out pretty quick, like, yo, that's not what that is. That's not to be said that some people don't fall victim to that though, and experience polyamory the first time with someone who's like, oh yeah, I'm polyamorous, but then they're really just kind of like
fucking around.
Fucking around. They're just kind of those, like I said, assholes in disguise. And so when it comes down to it, it's like, unfortunately we all have to learn, and unfortunately we all have to figure out what our boundaries are. And it can be scary waters, but dating is at large. So it's like, where do you want to take your risk, and can you stand up for yourself, and can you draw your boundaries? And if you're asking for something that someone is unwilling to tell you, I think one of the biggest signs of a fuck person is that they will not disclose like the number of partners that they're having, or that they will talk really vaguely about sexual testing, or they'll talk really vaguely about their interactions with others in a way that feels like they're deflecting, or feels like they're lying, or feels like they're hiding information from you.
Exactly. Good.
And
well put.
And so when it comes down to it, like if those things are happening, they might be red flags, right? Like check it.
Good. We've covered some red flags there. The next question, kind of, you touched on it briefly. You said there was a misconception of polyamory. What are some other common misconceptions of polyamory that you can say on this podcast?
Yeah. The biggest one that I encounter a lot is that you can decide to be polyamorous and that everyone around you will fall in line. They'll be okay with it and they'll go with it, and like it'll be all open and wonderland and merriment, and that like sometimes that will happen for the first couple of weeks, and then just inevitably things explode. My job, I do a lot of education and coaching, and I jokingly call what I do oftentimes triage. Like when people have fucked up real bad, usually their first go at this, they call me because they don't know what went wrong. And inevitably what went wrong is they went really fast. They didn't have any boundaries put in place. They didn't do a really good job of communicating what their expectations were. And oftentimes that comes to the detriment of the relationship. So that being said, it's that everyone will fall in line and that everything will be perfect and rosy and magical. That's one big misconception that winds up happening. And so when it comes down to that one, just things to take into consideration is like, if you are in a relationship already and this is something you're interested in doing, move slowly. Get help. Like have someone talk to other people who have done this. That could be a formal person like me, someone who does this and who is trying to ease this path, because I have done all of the things, and I have hurt, and I have been hurt, and I have I have making this up as I've gone along has been an incredible learning experience for me. And I'll always encourage other people to learn too. But like, you will get some incredible information talking to other people who have done it. So slow down. If you already have a crush on someone, this is another really key piece. Lots of times people want to open their relationship when they're in a reasonably happy relationship, but they develop a crush on someone else and they decide that they want an open relationship because of that crush. Like, stop it right there. Remove that crush. Stop being under the influence of that crush. Like, do not let someone externally outside of the relationship be the catalyst to open the relationship. Again, there will be pitchforks and things, I'm sure, for some people who are poly hearing that.
I don't know if I fully agree to that. Do you mean, I guess it's for me, it would depend on if it's like a crush, like, oh, there's a sexy new person at the gym, or there's like a hot new accountant at my work, or is it like a crush, like, oh, okay, this is a friend I've had for a year and now I have realized like I have really, really strong feelings for them, and does that?
I think any of those things. I think if there's an external pressure to open up your relationship, that is as a result of you having a crush on someone, I'm not saying like be mean to that person and like push them out of your life, but I am saying like, don't let that crush be the catalyst for the momentum that you need to push into opening a relationship. Because oftentimes if you have a crush and you want to act on it, you want to act on it like tomorrow. And that is not a feature that allows for patience, or that allows for this idea of taking your time and learning and moving and talking and being a thoughtful, reasonable human. If you are already monogamous, there are so many expectations that you've already set up in your relationship, and you have to fundamentally undo those first. And there is the skill set of doing it. Like, don't get me wrong, I highly encourage that, but so much heartache would be quelled if you just like took a pause, took like a month. I don't want to put arbitrary times on it because it depends on the relationship, but just took time to educate yourself, to reach out to other people, to do work together, because then it'll feel like you're doing it together. Not that you have to date together, but that you're on the same team, and that you're not like against each other trying to date other people outside of your relationship. Does that make sense?
So I hear. I think our versions of crush is, I get what you mean now about crush. I'm thinking more like if you're in love with if you find yourself just like starting to fall in love with someone, and you're kind of more like something more shallow, like, oh, this person I have a crush on, and I want to jump into their bed.
I mean, if you're already in a monogamous relationship, I don't think it really matters. Like, if you find yourself falling in love with someone else, that shouldn't hasten opening up a monogamous relationship. That's what I'm saying. Like, any of it. Like,
I see. So you should have that desire to be non-monogamous, and not have the excuse of, oh, now I feel like being non-monogamous because this new hot
exactly
I see. Okay, gotcha.
Like, if there are two people that are together, they're together for a long time, and one of them for any reason, they're falling in love with someone else. They did find a hot guy at the gym, doesn't matter, a hot person at the gym, right? If that's why they want to open their relationship, like, that is just not going to bode very well, especially if that crush doesn't pan through. Does that mean you want to be monogamous again? Like, what are the repercussions, and all I've seen all of that. Another common misconception is that people who are polyamorous shouldn't be jealous.
That they aren't jealous. Yeah, I get that one the most. Yeah.
Utter
Oh, you're
nonsense.
just not the jealous type. Or your partner's not the jealous type.
That's just nonsense. We are human. We still feel jealousy. It's about the power that you give to jealousy and whether or not you're willing to feel uncomfortable and face it and diffuse the threat or see the threat through. Jealousy is still pervasive in the non-monogamous community. It's just handled differently. And that's actually a skill set that I think a lot of folks who do engage in monogamous behaviors need. Like, we just need a more active approach to jealousy at large, instead of like pigeonholing it into a certain type of relationship, which I'm sure it sounds like you've had experience with. So
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, no, that's a very valid point. Is it's not just something. Jealousy isn't just something you should be working on, whether you're in an open relationship or polyamorous relationship. It's also something that we need to be working on, even if we're in a monogamous relationship.
yeah, it's just a part of the human experience, just like all of our other emotions are. And once we start thinking about it and sort of, I don't know, deconstructing it, like, just because you're in a relationship, you shouldn't feel sad. Like, that's nonsense.
Right.
You're gonna feel the feelings. You're gonna feel them. It's just a matter of, are they welcome? What do you do with them? How do you take care of yourself? All that jazz. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Any other misconceptions that you can think of?
Oh, let me think here. Are there any other that you can think of off the top of your head? I'm trying to see my list here.
For like open relationships, rather than polyamory, I'd say a misconception would be it's all about sex and they're just people who really love to have lots of sex.
Yeah, that's really, yes, agreed. Yes, that's very much a common misconception, is that like you're sex fiends or that your life is all about sex, which is hilarious because I don't know about you, but for me it's mostly about scheduling.
It's not about
like,
sex for me, no.
right? Figuring like, if I worried about sex that much, that'd be great. I would love to worry about sex a lot. But most of the time it's like, can we be in the same city? Let's talk about that. Can we get coffee? And so when it comes down to it, like, sure, there's a lot of people that do this for sex. Having multiple sex partners is a great experience for some, and that's part of it. But by no means, there's so much more to it. Like, to me, that speaks to this idea that we think all romantic relationships are is sex, right? There's so much more to it. So yeah, I think that's a really good one, and it's kind of ties into, similarly, another common misconception, at least that I used to get a lot. I see it sometimes now still, but there's a lot of talk back about it that has some resistance, is like that it means you don't actually love your partners. Because there's like this freaking Johnny Depp quote that keeps going around. Who knows if he actually said it, but it was something like, if you fall in love with someone else while you're in love with me, you're not actually in love with either of them, because you can't love two people simultaneously. That's a terrible way. Like, he said it in like 5 words, right? He said it in a very long-winded way. But when it comes down to it, like, to me, that's utter nonsense. And just the number of times I've had to like defend my love for my partners really used to just make me mad, of like, how can you can't tell me how I feel, blah, blah, blah. And then it came down to like expectation. We see this so much. And the best example that I can think of is like, what is that movie? Bridget Jones's Diary, where she has to like pick one of these 2 people who she's in love with, right? And it implies that like one is better and that they have to win. And I like, to me, that's nonsense, because I've been in love simultaneously with all kinds of people.
The amount of times I've seen a romance movie and just been like, if they were polyamorous, they would have no problems. All their problems would be solved.
Solution right there. And it's interesting though to think about this idea of, if you don't think that people can be in love simultaneously, you're not going to ever have that experience. So what happens if you let yourself? And what happens if you let yourself feel that? And for me, the thing that was the coolest about it, and I'd love to hear your experience with it, but was that it, like, fundamentally, the way that I love Ryan and the way that I feel when I think about how I love Ryan feels so different than the way in which I feel love for Jeremy. I can't compare it. It doesn't even exist in the same space in my body. Like, I do not love one more than the other, which is another fun thing that is a misconception. And that's one of those things where it's like, yeah,
they're so uncomparable. Yeah, and I think that's where people go wrong as well. Like I cannot stand it if I get questions of like which one, yeah, which one do you love more or whatever. It's like it's completely different in the way I interpret it, like the way I visualize it is my love for my partners, whether they're sexual, romantic, whatever you want to label it, they're I just love them. And I also love my mom and I love my sisters and I love my dog and I love myself and I love nature. And it's just like, it's like being like that. Like, what do you love more? Like swimming in water or walking in the forest? Or what do you love more? Your dog or your cat? Or do you love your mom more or your dad more? Or it's just like, I just love them all. And I don't want to like choose one. It's not like, choose one sister you can hang out with,
yeah.
never see the other one again. It's like, or yeah, it's just and then like with friendships, if I compare them to like my friends, it's like, yeah, there are some friends that that just make more time for me and I want to see them more and we hang out more naturally. And then there are some other friends that we get along very well and I think they're a great human being, but I prefer not to spend as much time with them. Like it's just like any other relationship that you have with anything else. Like for me, life is relationships. Life is about relationships, and you have a relationship with every single thing around you, whether that's a person or a living thing or your food or whatever, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah. The only other one that I can think of off the top of my head right now with misconceptions about polyamory, that's in addition to the little list that I created, is the one that you can't cheat in a non-monogamous relationship, which I think is always
yes, that's a very
uh,
good misconception.
and to me, it comes down to like, how do you define cheating? And to me, cheating is when you violate the expectations of a relationship. And so if you have a partner who is violating the expectations of the relationship and sleeping with someone who they're not telling you about, absolutely, that's still fundamentally the same pain as cheating. If you can be heartbroken by that. Like if you have an agreement when it comes down to the way in which your relationship is enacted and that agreement is violated, that violation is cheating. And I think that that's really important, because lots of people, I've heard people talk about non-monogamy as like, oh, they just cheat and talk about it. And it's like, no, because if they're talking about it, it's not cheating.
Yeah. Right.
That's sort of the flip side of that, right?
Yeah. My way would definitely be having sex or even not even sex, just like a desire to want to fulfill something in someone else and not even telling the other partner about it. You know, like,
just like let people know what's going on, and then we can talk about the ethics of that. But if you're doing something that you're hiding, usually that's indicative of some shitty behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good one.
But that being said, like, it is important to understand that privacy is still important in ethical non-monogamy, and that it's okay to have secrets, but secrets that like are a part of a privacy boundary. I don't tell my partners every last thing about me, but that doesn't mean that I'm not, like, that's just who I am. I have privacy boundaries, you know?
Right. I guess it's, I don't like the idea of having secrets from any of my partners, but the only thing I can think of for me personally would be like a boundary around, actually, no, I don't even have a boundary around that. I was going to say if they're asking me like what physical things I'm doing with my other boyfriend or my other partner, if they're saying, you know, like, what did you do in bed? I prefer them not go down that road, because I don't think they're going to get anything from it. I don't think it's beneficial to the relationship. So I prefer not to, but then again, I wouldn't say I have a strict boundary around that. If they really want to know, then I would tell them, but I would question why they're even asking.
Yeah. I think secrets is a charged word, and we have interesting associations with what it means.
Yeah.
But one of the best ways I can think about it is, one, it depends on how you define secret, of course, but thinking about, like, I have a number of best friends who are part of my polycule, if you will, that I'm not romantically or sexually involved with, but like, I do not share information between them. Like, if it tells me something, I don't tell my partners. Whereas in a lot of ways,
other
like,
people's privacy as well.
Yeah, there's like
Right.
if you think about privacy as a fence, right? Like you have your own fence,
Yes.
everyone has their own fence, and sometimes that fence can be shared. And we need to really think critically about how are we performing the fences of others. Have you talked about what information you're protecting and what you're not? And
Right.
for example, in monogamous relationships, lots of times, like best friends assume that their partner will tell their husband or wife anything, and so there's the
Yeah.
privacy boundary there is permeable. And when it comes down to it, my privacy boundaries that my partners tell me, they are not permeable, and I will uphold those. Um, for me, I do have privacies that are important to me that I don't talk about because it's mine. That information is fundamentally mine.
Yes.
And when it comes down to it, like, sure, they can ask about it and we might be able to have a conversation about it, but if they're hedging, if they're asking for information that I am unwilling to provide, they're not respecting a boundary of mine.
Can I know what that boundary is that you have?
I
Privacy?
have privacy boundaries around my own family, around certain emotional events that happen to me that are part of my own personal landscape. Some of my financial stuff I keep to myself.
Yeah.
Um, Information about my partners and my friends, those have strong privacy boundaries. And
Yeah.
these all took me a long time. Like, I think there is a huge dark side to the idea that open and honest communication needs to be everything.
Right.
The more I do this work, the more I actually think that logistic that way of approaching it does have some fundamental flaws, because we are stepping away from having any boundaries, and we need to learn how to actually uphold and respect our own boundaries. And so a lot of the work that I do with my clients is talking to them about, what are your boundaries? What are you comfortable with talking about? What don't you want to talk about? What about your other partners? What if you had another partner who was telling all of this information about you? How would you feel about that? And just doing the work of empathy, doing the work of, what does it feel like to have respected boundaries? um, and when it comes down to it, like, are there detriments to idealizing open communication to a way where there are none anymore? Because that winds up being problematic over time, just to be honest.
Yeah. Interesting. All perspective though as well, right? Because I can see where you're coming from, but no, that's really interesting how you have like yeah, privacy around your family and stuff. I don't really have privacy around
Yeah.
my partners. I don't think my primary partner has any around me either, but we are like with my primary partner, I'd say I'm definitely the most obviously closest with him. So, but yeah, each to their own. And as you say, like you prefer to even live on your own. So you have your own style of relationship, and if your partners respect that, and that's your choice and it works, then that's great.
Yeah. I mean, I live with Ryan now though, so
Yeah.
I've had to fundamentally change some things, but I'll live alone
Yeah.
again sometime.
Yeah. Interesting. And one last thing I want to touch on, just what are the most common challenges when you're working with people in open and poly relationships? What are the most common challenges they have, and how do people deal with those?
One of the biggest one is sustaining things long term. There's a phenomenon in open relationships called new relationship energy, which actually scientifically it's like the feeling of falling in love and what happens when all of our emotions kind of go haywire. And that particular phenomenon can last anywhere from 6 months to about 2 years. And so lots of times people just make really bad decisions during those times,
Uh-huh.
where they prioritize the new relationship energy instead of other experiences and other commitments that they've had, and that causes all kinds of problems. One of the biggest issues that I work with most of my clients is what we just talked about, with this idea of, what are your boundaries? How do you uphold them?
Yeah.
What are your communication styles? Those kinds of things. What are you talking about with other partners? That's a big one that I
Yeah.
work with a lot of people on, to maintain ongoing relationships. And then I'll like feelings challenges, how, like, I've never experienced this before, those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, this shit is all, there's not a lot of examples out there. There's not a lot of things where we can look at and say, like, how am I supposed to feel if I'm out with one partner and another partner walks in with their other partner that I didn't know yet, like all of that, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh God, like it's this idea that we have some kind of control over anything, really, right? And like being okay actually fundamentally with uncertainty and with the idea of what commitment looks like and all that kind of stuff. So those are some really big challenges that for some people, that the questions that they experience during those challenges last for some years trying to unravel them. And so, yeah.
I was on a date last night with my partner, and my other partner doesn't actually live in the same city, but he comes up here a lot for work. And he was in the city for a few days, and he ended up eating out at the same restaurant that we were at last.
Oh my God.
And it was so lovely though, because he just like got up off and he was there with like his brother and like some family. And he just like got up at the table and said hello to both of us. And it was just so nice. So I was there and I could like see one of my partners in the corner of my eye, and then the other one was across the table from me. It was so nice.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah. That idea of uncertainty, like being comfortable with uncertainty, that's so true. Cause it's like, you never know when someone's going to die or a new person enters someone's life.
I'm glad you said that. I usually use that example, but it's always kind of morbid.
No, I always think like that. I'm always like, what if I died tomorrow? Like,
right? We have insurance. Like, that's always. Let's talk about logistics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, love it. All right, perfect. I think we covered pretty much everything I had on my notes. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it was so good to
talk to you. Is there anything else you want to say that I haven't asked or that we haven't touched on today?
If you're interested, one of the big things that you'll hear if you're interested in non-monogamy is the importance of communication. And that's something that I dedicated my life to. It's what I got my PhD in, and it's something that I ongoingly research and have a relationship with. And so if you're interested, and I'm sure that this will be out there, but my website is unscriptedrelationships.com, and that's my Instagram handle. And I just finished a book, or launched the book in August, called Use Your Words, and it's called Opening Language for Open Relationships, and it talks about all that kind of stuff. So if it's something that you're interested in, it is a look specifically at communication in open relationships, which is just a little bit different than some of the other things that have been out. Some of the other really great resources out there, like Opening Up and all that kind of stuff. So that's know that you are not alone anymore, that there are all kinds of resources out there, and that if you have questions, like, just seek it out. There's some really, really incredible work being done right now, and this is a wonderful resource. And it sounds like that you have some other podcasts on this topic too. So go back and listen to the other podcasts too if you haven't.
Great. Thank you so much. Congratulations on your book, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I was following your stories. I saw that. Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah.
Yay. I will put your website and your Instagram in the show notes so people can check you out there.
Perfect. It's been so wonderful talking with you and hearing about your experience. It's always good to connect with someone from across the globe.
It really is. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Have a good one.
Hey YouTube fam, if you like this video, make sure to hit the like button below. And if you think a friend, a family member, or just someone you know who could benefit from this podcast episode, please share this video with them. And if you've been enjoying the Elevate Your Soul podcast, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for new episodes weekly. Thank you.